Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's Saddleback webinar. I'm Liz Mangus, Literacy Specialist for Saddleback Educational Publishing. We have a fantastic webinar planned for you today, but as usual, we've hopped down just a few minutes early so you can locate your control bar. We have made the move to Zoom webinar, so those of you who haven't joined us for the past couple of weeks, this might be news to you, but we are now on Zoom. So the thing to know about Zoom is on your control bar, you have the chat and the Q&A. So if you want to ask a question of our panelists today or of Saddleback, make sure you use that Q&A icon. The chat, though, is going to allow you to interact with all of your fellow attendees. So when you want to talk to your attendees, when you want to participate in any of the questions or the games that we're going to be talking about today, you want to go to the chat area to do that. One thing to keep in mind, though, is when it comes to chatting and interacting with each other, you do have the option, there's a little drop down there. If you want all of the attendees to see what you're saying, you have to choose the little option there that says all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, just me and Dr. Hemphill and a few Saddleback people are going to see it. So just keep in mind, if you want to share with everybody, make sure you check the little drop down that you want your chat to go to all panelists and attendees. Another thing to keep in mind is that I know you all are used to getting a recording of the webinar, a follow-up email with the recording that has in the past come out pretty quickly. Now you're going to expect to see that within 24 hours. So yes, you will receive a recording of this webinar. You will receive the follow-up email, but that will go out tomorrow. So that's one thing you need to know. We have such a great interactive experience for you today. So if you haven't already, why don't you go to your little chat area and say hello, practice using that chat area because you're going to need to know how to do that today to interact with us. Another thing that we want you to be aware of is social media. Every week we show you this slide and we say, follow us, go to Twitter, let everybody know that you're joining us today. I want to draw your attention to Dr. Hemphill's social media information here on the bottom of this screen, because I'm not sure if you know this, but Dr. Hemphill is the language lady on YouTube. I mean, if you have not checked out her channel, you should go. Not right now, but after the webinar. Don't leave us yet. So check her out on YouTube, Instagram, and of course, we know many of you are on Twitter, and Twitter is your preferred platform. So go ahead, shout us out, follow us, say hello, let everybody know you're joining us today. We will get started in just a few minutes at exactly 3 o'clock Eastern time. So until then, let's say hello to Dr. Hemphill. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited. I have my ESL teacher shirt on to represent all the wonderful educators are in the room. So I'm really, really happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. I know this is a kind of a nerve-wracking time of year because everybody's getting ready to go back and everybody's trying to plan for effective virtual instruction, and especially with our English learners, trying to engage them. And we know we had a great teacher panel on last week who talked about what worked for them in the spring when they kind of ventured into this virtual learning. And one of the things that kept coming up again and again was games and gamifying things. And so based on that conversation, we had a lot of people who decided to join us today, and they may have been aware of you from YouTube already. And so a lot of enthusiasm from our audience to learn from you today. So where are you and how's the weather where you are?
Well, I feel like the weather can't really make up its mind, but I'm currently located in Pennsylvania, in central Pennsylvania. And it's very muggy and humid. It's not as, temperature is not as high, but it's been pretty muggy. Last night or 2 nights ago, we had quite the rainstorm. So it's been interesting. So yeah.
So one of the things, I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. And when I moved to Texas, everybody up there would say, oh, it's so hot down there. It's so hot all the time, especially in the summer. But we're pretty good about having buildings with air conditioning in this part of the world, which is not necessarily the case up in the Northeast. So I feel for you right now because it gets pretty hot up there for sure. Oh, hey, Rochester. I got the chat open and people are telling me where they're from.
Yeah,
so
it's distracting because I want to see where everyone's from. It's so exciting.
Yes,
Yes.
Rochester in the house. We got Ogden, Utah, South Carolina, Kansas, El Paso, Canada. We always have a good showing from Canada.
Great.
And New Jersey, Los Angeles. I know I can't keep up. The chats are coming in so fast. This
Good.
is so
Someone earlier
exciting.
was from Texas. Ooh, I saw Lima, Peru. That's great. Wow.
Awesome. Oh, I saw Canandaigua. Hey, all these Western and Central New York people. Those are my people. Okay.
California, Michigan, Maine. Wow.
Yeah.
Texas. Oh, this is
Yeah.
great.
This is awesome. I actually spent some time for our Canadian audience. I actually spent some time in Canada. I lived in Peterborough, Ontario for a little while. So if you're from that part of the world, let me know. Haven't been there in a really long time. I bet it's changed a lot since then. Okay, St. Paul, Minnesota. Oh, another person who grew up in Buffalo and Rochester.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you, Peter. I always love to hear that. California. Isn't this so cool to see everybody
It
jumping
is.
in?
I love it. Yeah, I saw
Yeah.
a couple people from, I think I saw someone from Turkey and someone from Puerto Rico. So that was really exciting. Do you typically get audiences from Puerto Rico coming in?
I haven't seen that as a trend, no. So
Okay.
I think that's your audience. You're pulling people in for us. Okay. Oh, it is 3 o'clock Eastern time. It is time for us to officially start, ladies and gentlemen. So let's go ahead and officially introduce Dr. Sandra Hemphill. So our topic today is gamification in the classroom for your English language learners. Huge topic, a huge need for this information. So I'm thrilled that you are here. Let me tell everybody a little bit about you before we turn it over to you. So if you are unfamiliar with Dr. Hemphill, Language Lady on YouTube, check it out. She is an 8th grade English language development specialist in Pennsylvania. She has taught elementary, middle, and high school in suburban, urban, and rural districts in both Pennsylvania and Massachusetts since 1999. She has also served as an English language development supervisor to improve the quality of ESL programs and teacher effectiveness in the classroom. She's a former English language learner herself, and she understands the experiences of students who are adjusting to learning English. She comes from a Spanish-speaking Puerto Rican family and has always been fascinated with the process that individuals experience when learning a language. In 2015, she graduated with a doctoral degree in educational leadership and administration. And because of her dissertation work through that process, that's what prompted her to launch her YouTube channel, The Language Lady, where she shares tips, strategies, and resources for teachers around the world. She is recently partnered with Bridge TEFL, the largest provider of TEFL certification training in the United States, to produce webinars, trainings, and blogs for teachers abroad. Welcome, Dr. Hemphill. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the time you put in to putting this information together for our audience. So I'm going to let you go ahead and take screen control. I'm going to hang out for the first few slides while we're interacting with the audience, and then I'll disappear a little bit.
Okay. Well, it is a pleasure to be here. And I just want to thank everyone who's shown up because you have tons of choices of what to watch and what to do today. So I really, really appreciate it. I'm so excited. Oh, I just love watching where everybody is from and reading the text chat. But yeah, so to start, we've already talked about where everyone's from. So I did want to know what grades you teach, just to kind of to read the room. So if you want to go ahead, and Liz, I think is going to be pulling up a poll so that you can put in what levels you teach. And I know some people teach more, a wider range, so just go ahead and.
We've got about 60% of our responses in, so we'll just keep it up for a few more seconds and give people time.
I see we have a lot of newcomers. I see them in the text box.
Okay, we'll do about 20 more seconds on this, and then I'll close it out. All right, we are just about ready. Okay. And it looks like we have
Oh, even.
It's pretty even, which is great. I think everybody's going to be very happy with what you have to share. It's, I think, applies to lots of grade levels. All right, let me stop this. Okay.
Yeah, hopefully my PowerPoint will, okay. And I just want you to go ahead and also in the chat box, just type in how often you include games in your classroom. That's something that's very particularly interesting to me. So, so I see, okay, so there's some threes sometimes, rarely, okay. You
A lot
are
of
all
threes.
so fast. I love it. Everyone's just typing away. That's great. Okay.
I'm seeing a lot of threes. A lot of people put themselves right there in the middle.
That's really exciting though that people are using them in their classroom. So this is great. Okay.
All right, excellent. Well, I'm going to turn off my camera and let you take over and share all this great stuff with us today. Thank you.
All right, well, wonderful. So the first thing I just want you to think about is why do you feel that games are good for English language learners? You don't have to type it in the chat box, but just think about it. And I will just go through some of the findings that I have found, and then we can have a conversation about it. But we know that games are excellent for student engagement. I know for myself, with my English language learners, the biggest hurdle I found, I teach middle school, is a lot of my students are very hesitant. Even if they are more advanced on the continuum, they tend to shy away from engaging in class. And games just lends itself perfectly to that. It does bring about a sense of community. I felt that my class became more bonded than ever before than I have seen in the past when I didn't use games. But of course, there's other modalities to do that. I really did see that it reinforced their learning because some of my students learn best in a not in your traditional format. So I saw that that was really wonderful. And I know for myself, when I would incorporate games and I knew that it was going to be a lot of fun, I was more excited to teach the content, and my students also were more excited, and they could feel my enthusiasm in the classroom. I'm all over the place and, you know, dancing and singing, and my students laugh at me, but they enjoy it. But I feel that when I know I'm going to be incorporating games, they get excited, and obviously because the students love it. But I did want to direct your attention a little bit more to the research and what it does tell us. And I know some administrations are sometimes hesitant towards games, and there are some misperceptions about games out there. But one of the leading researchers in education who let me tell you, I fangirl this person. His name is Dr. Robert Marzano, that I'm sure most of you have heard. I saw him at a conference once, and I was just like a groupie. I actually went up to him right before he presented, and I said, "Can I get a picture with you?" And he probably thought I was crazy. But why I respect him so much as a researcher is that when he puts something out there as being this is best practice, he really means this is best practice because he has studied and triangulated the data. In other words, he's looked at multiple research studies that have looked at a specific best practice and looks at all these research findings, and then he comes up with the best top, what is the trend through all that data. And when he looked at games, he saw that there was a huge impact on the impact in the classroom in terms of how students were engaged and their performance in the classroom and on standardized tests and just their overall academic achievement. However, he did stress that as long as they have these 4 factors, if they're used to not have inconsequential competition, in other words, making sure that if a student is playing a game, they know that the points aren't going to affect their grade, for example. And also targeting essential academic content. I feel that I say that in so many of my videos, but it's so key because we know that our ELs are not always exposed to that strong academic language that they need to be able to survive in everyday settings and so forth. So making sure that's embedded, debriefing the game. I think a lot of times we think of games like Jeopardy where you play the game and then you say, okay, this is right or wrong, and then continue. But there has to be a moment where you stop and say, okay, let's unpack that. Let's go deeper, why that answer is incorrect. And finally, whether you use interactive notebooks or whatever you use in the classroom for the students to record their learning, I always make sure that I go back and just have students revise their notes based on any games that we're playing. Just to share with you a little bit about my journey with games, I haven't always used it. This is my fifth year in the middle school setting, and I didn't always use games. I mean, I was trying to feel my way and trying to find out what my students' interests are. And this particular year was a pivotal year for me. I felt like I had my aha moment, as we say in education, is that I looked at my students that were coming to me. I teach, just to give you a little bit of background, I teach intervention 3 days a week. And in that intervention block where I pull students, I have 3 different classes. One class is comprised of my newcomers, and then 2 classes of students who are further along in their language proficiency continuum. And I get to work with them, each of those classes, for an hour. But as many of us see that our students really, at least in our building and my experience, is that the speaking scores were quite low. And a lot of times in talking with my colleagues and my counterparts that teach content, the content subject areas, they would come to me and say, I wish I could get my students to speak more. And so I really had to dig deep and think, what is one way I can get them to be more engaged? So I toyed with the idea of speaking. I started doing research, and I found this incredible, simple little tweak to a game, because in my mind, I thought, I need to keep to the schedule. I need to make sure that I make this hour as effective as possible. So I found this game that I could embed into the lesson, where my students were simply just, they were in a circle, and I'm trying to turn on the video here. Okay, so basically they had to state a sentence in the present and the past. And this is just a clip from a YouTube video that I recorded. And what I noticed is, after I had them standing in a circle, they had to simply catch a ball to each other, throw the ball. But if they didn't clap before catching, then they would answer a question. This was, and it sounds so simple, but it completely changed the vibe in my classroom. So then the very next day, when my students would walk in, they're like, Missy, vamos a jugar el juego. Most of my students are Spanish speaking, but are we gonna play the game today? And that told me, wow, this is, was a turning point. So then I started thinking about, okay, I need to really focus more next year to amping more games in my classroom. But I did want to ask all of you today to type in the chat box your idea of the difference between gamifying and actual games. So this is something that I really had to dig deep into, because I really didn't know the difference at first. So if you just want to type that in, the difference between gamifying and games. So we'll see. I see the first time here. Okay, so some of you have not heard gamifying before. Great. Games have win or conclusion, not sure. Okay. Wonderful. Learning versus fun. So a lot of different responses. This is excellent. So what I've found, and what has been like the standardized, is that game-based learning is just using game elements to teach a specific skill or achieve a specific learning outcome. And it takes your core content and objectives and makes it fun. So, if you have an actual specific game that you teach your students to play, whether it's, for example, I use a lot of file folder games, especially for my non-reluctant learners who are not quite ready to interact with another student. But gamification is the application of the aspects of a game, but to your regular setting. So in that instance, with the clap and catch, I didn't do anything different. Originally, what the students were supposed to do as part of our intervention block was just to simply answer, turn and talk with a partner, state the sentence in the present tense, and then state it in the past. But by simply having them get out of their seats instead and stand in a circle, then it's gamifying it, because the task is the same, you're just adding that extra game element. So Again, clap and catch is an example. Another one that maybe all of you are familiar with is called Trashkaball, which is a lot of fun, where it's simply you're asking students to answer a question, and what they do is they stand at a certain point in the room and they take a bald piece of paper, or it could be, you know, a ball that wouldn't, a foam ball, and just throw it and try to reach their target in a trash can. And if they get it for their team, they win a point. Let me tell you, it's so much fun. The kids, they do get noisy, but it is a targeted on-task assignment. They're having fun, which is so important. And I've never used this particular app, and I'm curious, type in the chat box if you have used Classcraft in your classroom. A dear colleague of mine who teaches at the high school raves about this all the time. And Classcraft, there is a paid version, but the free version is amazing. It's you basically simulate almost like a game in your classroom, where a role-playing game where all your students have avatars. And it's a great way to really get them thinking about, let's say your target is that you want them to be kind to one another, or say specific things to each other, or if there's like an academic goal that you have, you embed that within the game, and the students, you can have it projected on the board, but the students are going along their regular class time with you, but they're actually excited because they want to see what their avatar is going to do, and you know what their team is going to achieve as a group. So there's rewards that you can decide that your students would be willing to work towards. So it's something that I encourage you to look into. All I know is that my coworker is absolutely in love with it, and she plans to use it again this year. So what I wanted to talk about with you today is go through a series of games that I have incorporated in my classroom. I've actually used these games in my YouTube videos as well to show teachers how to implement them. But this first game is what really, I'm telling you, it changed the game for me, and it's called Who Wants? And you simply have to use a pack of Uno cards. And the objective of this game is just to get students to speak in complete sentences and use nouns and adjectives in a sentence. And believe me, you can use it with newcomers and beginners. In one of my courses that I teach, it's comprised of mostly newcomers and beginners. And so what it comprises is each student will get a deck of 7 Uno cards. And unlike the traditional game of Uno, if you've played it before, the object is to be the one that you get rid of all your cards. In this one, the goal is that you have a set of cards that are all of the same color, or you can have it all the same number. So they want to have pairs at the end of the same. So it's cohesive in that way. And what happens is on the board, you will list 1 through 9, whatever nouns that you are working on, for example. And then on the other side, you'll have a list of colors, and each color is connected to an adjective. So if I'm the first student and I'm dealing cards, I'm going to look at my deck of cards, and I'm going to want to, for example, let's say I have 3 reds and the rest are yellow. I have a choice. I can try to make them all red or yellow. So I will turn to my neighbors in the group and say, does anyone have and their target is to get a specific card. So let's say they may say, I need a yellow car. And someone will say, oh, I'm sorry. Or they could say, sorry, my chat box is covering the adjective there. Expensive. Yellow's expensive. So does anyone have an expensive car? And if someone has it, they'll say, yes, I do, and hand it to them. So the object of this is to get your students speaking using that vocabulary, the sentence structure. And let me tell you a quick story. One of my students emphatically told me before class, Missy, yo no voy a hablar en tu clase. I'm not going to speak. Let me tell you, when we did this game, she was one of the ones talking, and I was so giddy with excitement inside, and I didn't want to make a big deal because I didn't want to call attention to her and make her feel embarrassed. I obviously, at the end of class, I praised her for participating, but she was one of the vocal ones. And so it just shows you that just tweaking that a little bit, just taking a simple concept like Uno cards can really change. In your packet that you are, or the Google Drive is listed a bunch of other games. This is just 1 out of 100. There's 100 to up to 200 uses for Uno cards, and you can tweak it. But one of the things I want you to be thinking about today as I share with you these games is to really be mindful of how you can integrate listening, reading, speaking, and writing in every lesson. So as you're thinking of the features of language, and I like to look at it as a house. So many times when I co-teach with teachers, they tend to think of the vocabulary. Let's make sure they have the vocabulary, but then what do they do with that vocabulary, right? So I see the vocabulary as like the bricks of the house. So as we're interacting with the vocabulary, we want to take it one step further, and we want to think about the sentence dimension. So in this particular example, I'll model for you what we're going to be doing for the other games. So in this example, the things that they need to know on the word phrase level to be successful in this particular game is obviously these vocabulary words, right? They also need to know for sample number 6 that there's shades of meaning, because they may know in my class that table means, you know, the table that we sit at and write and or eat, but then in math class, it can mean something completely different. So going over that. When we think about the sentence level brings us to think about the grammar part of the sentence or the type of sentence it is. So prior to even teaching this lesson, I had to make sure that my students understand how to form a question and where to place the question mark in the sentence when writing it, and how their voice is supposed to go up when they ask a question, and also just all of those different modalities about since my students are Spanish speakers, in their mind they're thinking, okay, the noun comes first, then the adjective. And so I had to really explicitly teach us the other way around in English. And then last but not least, we have the discourse level. How are we going to prepare our students to be able to speak? So for this particular lesson, it's not shown here, but there was a word sentence frame that I provided for them. And that was just, you know, really helped ease that anxiety and help them to speak. So just take a look at the can-do descriptors that's also included in your virtual handouts or your digital handouts, and just think about, is this particular lesson appropriate for an entering level? What are the things that we're showcasing and helping our students to feel confident in this lesson? Okay, and curiosity, what other ways in your mind, can you adapt these particular lessons in your classroom or these games? So I'll be asking you that. So every single game that I show you, be thinking about, you know, the word level, the sentence level, and the discourse level, and also what ways can you adapt it or apply it in the classroom? Okay, so the next game is called Guess the Word. The objective of this game is for students to listen to partners' prompts and to guess a mystery word. And it's appropriate for intermediate levels, but there's ways you can tweak it so that it's appropriate for your students who are beginners and newcomers. So how this works, and this is featured through Teach This, which is a great company that I've also collaborated with. And each student is going to work as a pair. One student will be student A, and the second student will be student B. And you'll take this piece of paper, cut it in half, they'll both get it. And the purpose of this game is to get student A, for example, will see that the list of words are blue, as you can see in the example. The second one is 18, the 3 is sushi. So as student A, I'm going to ask student B I'm going to ask them questions to see if I can get them to answer the question, to guess the mystery word. So I can say, what color is the sky? Person B will say, it's blue, and they will check it off, right? After, you'll time each student, give them a certain amount of time to ask student B a question, and then after the timer goes off, you're going to switch teams and then have them turns, and then have student B do the same thing. Once it's completed, you can have the students then see which partner pair got the most points, and they win. And I know that a lot of you are probably wondering, how can this be applied digitally? How can this be done online? There's different ways of doing that. You can send them ahead of time and have them in breakout rooms. But what's really nice about the Teach This company is that they have been mindful of the situation that we're going on in the world with quarantine and being on lockdown and so forth, is that they have digitized a lot of their games. So just curious, what are some things that you have seen? What are some of these dimensions students would have to be, or you as a teacher would have to be prepared to be mindful of to teach this game? Just make sure to put in the comment section. It could be, you can mention what words, the sentence level, or the discourse dimension, any of those. Yes, I see someone said you can use dice, you can use silly sentences. Someone asked, can you do this with a classroom of 30 plus? Yes, that's what it's designed for. You can break them up into pairs, or you can get creative with it. So target words for units. Yes, use pictures next to words. Yes, this is what is really what's really nice about this game, is that you can use it as is, but then you can recreate it and then change it around for newcomers. Yes, make sure that students know the vocabulary. Absolutely, they need to know that that's the word phrase level dimension. Excellent. I just wish I could read all of your comments. Okay, so here are the can-do descriptors again. So just keep in mind, we're talking about students who are at the intermediate level. So if we look at that continuum in the middle, what are those things that we're highlighting to make sure that they're successful? So what ways can we adapt this game in the classroom? What are your thoughts? So someone asked, where do these descriptors come from? So they come from WIDA, and I will make sure, and I believe it's already in part of the digital, it's found in Google Drive, so you'll have a link to that.
Sandra, I'm going to jump in here because I see a lot of people asking for the links. The link to your digital resources, we place that in the chat periodically. So scroll through the chat and you'll be able to see that. And also we just keep posting it throughout our time together today. So you'll definitely see it. And that's what Sandra's referring to. And that's where all the resources are. All right, back to you, Sandra.
And I did see someone did say that you can also provide that for students. You can tweak it and have it be science content related. So I did see someone say that the Google link is not working. So I'll have to look at that. Okay, so for the next game, Would You Rather, is a game that is produced by the company called American English. And this game comes in the format of, it's paper and you print it out. But I actually use this in my Zoom meeting sessions with my students. So I found a way to digitize it and got creative with it so that we could actually do it in a Zoom meeting. And it's appropriate for intermediate levels. Again, you can tweak it for students at the advanced and newcomer beginners. Students will, and the objective is that students will listen to a prompt and use a sentence frame to complete a thought. So how this works, and I'll just minimize this a little bit here, is that I tweaked this for you, and I also did this for you in the Google Drive so that you wouldn't have to manipulate it. You can have it just like this, because this game does not come in this original form. So all your students obviously will start at the start aspect, and then they'll roll a die. And there is a YouTube link that has a die that will play, and you can pause it. One of the things I do is I have the students count to 10, and then when they get to 10, then I'll look to see where the dice lies. So let's see, the dice right here is on number 4. So then the first student will move 4 spaces, and there's different questions like number 4 is, would you rather live in a house or in an apartment? And it's a great way to warm up your class, and we have a lot of fun with this. I think we end up laughing a lot and so forth. If your students are really excited about the actual act of rolling a piece of dice, one thing you could do is have them take a random piece of paper and divide it into 9 squares and have them get something that like a penny or a coin or something, or a piece of a clip, and just throw it, and wherever number it lies on, that's how many spaces that they can go. So I know some of my students, my middle school students, don't mind. They're like, oh yes, Missy, you do it, you manipulate it. But some students like that tactile component. So this is a great game, great warm up. It's a great way to end the class and so forth. So let's go back to our different levels of language, the features of language. What would you have to prepare to be able to teach this lesson, either at the word phrase dimension, at the sentence dimension, at the discourse dimension? Go ahead and type in the chat box. I see somebody said that they use the would you rather questions as a warm up. Yes, that's great. Context, yes, they definitely need context for that, because some of these questions may be really unfamiliar to them. So definitely you have to teach them context, provide sentence frames. Oh, and I see Nid actually, oh, thank you so much. She actually, you can all see that she's included the link to the actual dice that you can use. So yes, using background knowledge, content, visual, sentence frames, excellent. Love this. You are all on it today. Okay, so again, we have our sentence frames. And let me make this bigger here. And then another game is a scavenger hunt. Believe it or not, middle school students love this. I know my students did. And it just took it to a different level where we were exploring descriptive words. This was kind of getting their feet wet, so to speak, so that, or to entice them to start thinking about descriptive paragraphs and descriptive sentences and getting those words that really come alive. So we had us do that during a session together in Zoom, and we didn't do all of them, but we did some of those, and that was a lot of fun to get some thinking about things around their house. Because my students tend to compartmentalize academic vocabulary. It's like, okay, academic vocabulary is what I do at school, but when I get at home, there's a disconnect. So this was a great way for them to start connecting certain vocabulary words and descriptive academic words in their home. And I see there's another question. Can we have all of your games PowerPoint presentation? Yes, I've actually listed on the Google Drive. So I'll definitely check that with the team to find out why for some of you it's not working, because it definitely, I embedded my whole complete slide for you in there. So other online resource, yes, go ahead.
Sandra, I know because we have a ton of questions, people are loving this stuff, and there's some issues with people getting to the link. So we are providing a link in the chat, and I believe it goes to a zip folder, and then you have to open that folder, and then everything's going to be in there. So some people are saying it's not working for me, but others are saying, oh, I've got it. We will definitely do what we can do to get all of these things to you. If you're still having issues after the fact, we definitely want you to have all of this, because Dr. Hemphill put it all together and took the time to do that. So we will get it to you, I promise. The other thing that people keep asking is, earlier you mentioned something about a list of like 100 games to do with Uno cards or something like that. Is that in the, did you include that in the file? Okay, people said they're not seeing it. So if by chance it's not there, I just wanted to make an announcement, we will get it to you. If it's not there, it was an oversight, I apologize, but we will definitely get it to you. So I just wanted to interrupt because we are hearing you and we will solve the problem. All right. Thank you. I'll try not to interrupt anymore.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
In terms of those links, it is on one of the pages, but I could be that I forgot. So I wanted to also mention these online resources that, again, got my students really excited. The first one is Bamboozle. I'm not sure how many of you have played it before, but what's really nice about Bamboozle, let's see if I can press, I recorded these all for you so you could see. So Bamboozle is completely free. And what it does is that it allows you to, it has a plethora of topics. So if you're covering adjectives, grammar, sentence structure, prepositions, I mean, you name it, it is all embedded in that. And what it does is that prior to playing the game, you have that choice to have a little game preview and have your students practice some of the content that they'll be seeing so that it's not as overwhelming when you actually play the game. And then, if I can see here, I'm gonna fast forward here. So how to play the game is you're going to use Bamboozle to divide your students into teams, and teams take turns choosing and asking random questions. Once they've answered a question, there is a checkbox that you will click on, and it tells them whether or not the answer is correct or incorrect. You have the ability through Bamboozle to group your students into teams. You can have teams of 2, 3, and 4, however you want. And there's 2 modes. There's a quiz mode, and then there's the classic mode. Quiz mode is, in my opinion, rather boring because it's your typical, you know, answering question and they get it right, and you move on. And it calculates their points. The classic mode is what my middle school students go crazy over. And what it does is that they'll answer the questions as they normally would, but when they get the answer correct, there is a segment of it, and I'm gonna see if I can try to fast forward here so you can see it. It will switch it up for them, and sometimes the other team will automatically win the points that they were supposed to win. And I had a student actually recorded, I showed it in the Instagram story because I thought it was so funny. One of my boys said, "Hey, I was supposed to get that point." You know, it's so funny how they just went back and forth. So then the second round, another student wanted to get back at that student and really playfully and, you know, take away their points. And there's also another option in Bamboozle where unexpectedly you lose points and they gain points. But obviously, if you have students who are really sensitive and are developmentally do not like that, you know, losing points, even though they actually won there, then you can go to the other mode and do it that way too. So it's really nice because it's set for all types of personalities of students. Then sometimes I use bingo in my classroom. And again, when you're online teaching with your students, it's harder to obviously do anything that is paper and so forth. So what's really nice about bingo, this digital version of bingo, is that it works a lot like Kahoot, if you've ever played it, where you create your bingo card with the target vocabulary words that you are focusing on with your students, but then you send your students a link, and then it automatically randomizes the vocabulary words for you. And then literally the students, they can have 2 windows open. You're talking with them in the chat box or through Zoom, but then simultaneously they get to play bingo with you. I believe it's free. I use the free version, and it allows you to disperse it out to 30 students. And it's just a great convenient way because of the fact that you obviously are not in person with your students. And I did notice earlier that some of you do use Kahoot in your classroom. I love Kahoot for many different reasons. And for those of you who haven't played it before, Kahoot is a virtual game where it's multiple choice questions that you have your students literally link up. You send them a link, and then they can answer questions either on a computer or on their phone. And so literally within seconds after the question, after everyone has answered the question, it tabulates how many points everyone has received. I like to actually use this game not in the traditional sense always. Sometimes I will ask a question, for example, if I'm covering a vocabulary word or a series of vocabulary words, I use it to test to see how familiar they are. So instead of the choices being, for example, what's the definition of concrete, let's say. Instead of doing that, I'll actually have a vocabulary word displayed, but then the choices are how familiar are you with this word? So there'll be a continuum. A would be, I've used this word in everyday language, to all the way to I've never seen this word before. So right then and there, I'm getting immediate feedback from the students, and I know what to focus on versus just going straight to teaching that. So I know what to focus and put my attention to. The next game is very similar to the Bamboozle game that I have used, and this is thanks to a wonderful friend of mine who is also a teacher YouTuber. by the names of Games for ESL. So I highly recommend that you check his channel out. But in this game, you are also going to make teams. And the object of the game is for students to take turns clicking on the letters to the game. And then it's going to display a question that they answer. But then there's a twist to it, just like Bamboozle, where, for example, this is a screenshot of an actual lesson that I did with my students. We were working, we actually use Saddleback books that are embedded within eyelet. And one of the questions was, how does Trino react to the book lady he reacts to her by? So they go ahead and answer that question. And then they have to answer, do I keep the box or do I give the box? And they have to accept the consequences of what's in that box. If they say they want to keep the box, they could receive 100 points, but it also could be they lose 100 points, give or take. And again, just like Bamboozle, you have to kind of decide whether your students are too sensitive by losing points. It's meant to be a playful, innocent type of game. But here are a list of all the resources that I've mentioned today with all of you. And I do see that some of you are saying that they are not, the resources aren't opening, so hopefully we can fix that. Just to give you background about myself, I do have, these are all my social media handles, and I'm very active on YouTube and Instagram. I'm trying to break out into the Twitter world. I'm trying to master one social media link at a time, but I'm really excited. I only started this channel back in September, and it's been really exciting to get to interact with different teachers from all around the world. And eventually we will be moving to doing live streams so that we can interact with one another. And I'm just so happy to have this opportunity to share all of this information with all of you. And this will open up to questions and answers.
Thank you so much. Here, before, for those of you who attend our webinars regularly, you know that before we go to Q&A, we always like to let you know what's coming up. We do have a ton of questions, so don't go anywhere because we will definitely get to those questions. So coming up next week, we will have Valentina Gonzalez joining us, and she's going to talk about creating a culturally responsive learning environment. I know a lot of you are already following Valentina on social media, and so you know what great content she provides. So that will be next Thursday, July 30th. You can go to our website to register, sdlback.com/webinar series, or you should be getting an email prompting you to register. If you haven't already, you should be getting it within the next couple of days. So we hope that you will join us. So as far as questions go, before I direct a few to you, Dr. Hemphill, I want to say thank you to Thomas, who provided this information in the chat. He said to open the zip folder in Google Docs, you have to open it with Zip Extractor. The icon for that shows up at the top middle of the page. So that's a little tip for those of you who are having some issues opening that folder. But either way, we'll do what we can to get those to you if you're still having trouble. I also wanted to point out earlier, I was asking you Sandra, where the list of the 100 things you can do with Uno is. Shelly Alexander, thank you so much. She dug through all the documents and she put in the chat. You can find that in sources. There's a document in there called Sources for Games Used in Webinar, and that is where that list is. So we didn't forget it. It's just in that separate file. So those are the first two things I wanted to mention. Now let me check the chat quickly here. Okay, good. Everything's looking good. Everybody's very happy so far. I do want to actually say that earlier on, when you were talking about the Uno games and Classcraft, we had a lot of people chiming in with how you might adapt those particular games for virtual use. And then it's sort of in the second half of your presentation, you started talking about things that were specifically
Yes.
digital. But I did want to circle back to that because there were a few people who were interested in like the Uno games and some of those other things that were for more of a brick and mortar setting and wanted to know, was there something we could do with those digitally or not that you could think of?
On the top of my head, it's a little tricky. I would assume possibly similar to what I did with the board game, the Would You Rather game. There could be ways, you don't have to think about that, but I would assume that you could possibly, I know that there is a website called Classin. I've never used it, but a lot of my counterparts, my friends that work in the YouTube space that are also ESL teachers, they've talked about Classin, and I've noticed that there are ways that you can actually virtually send cards to each student, and I'm not sure how that works, but that's something to look into. Classin is the name of that. But in terms of Uno, I think it would have to, a card game to that nature would be a little tricky, but I'm sure there's ways
Yeah,
to
I
do it.
wonder if, and this is something to look into, I don't know if this exists, but I wonder if there's some sort of like Uno online app or something that gives you access to the cards to maneuver digitally. It might be worth looking into. So just a thought. Another thing early on when you were presenting some of those in-class games, people were asking about whether or not these games are doable given safety precautions around COVID and reducing touch points. So like the game that you brought up earlier where kids were passing the ball to one another, that might not be one that you would do
Right.
if you're supposed to be reducing touch points and things like that. So people were asking about that, and I wanted to give you a chance to kind of respond to that, but I think the general consensus is, you know, these are all great, but we're going to have to get creative with how we
Yes, I
can
mean,
use those.
when you think about a game like the clap and catch, instead of catching it, maybe you can have students, I'm literally, this is on the top of my head, so if this is crazy, I'm sorry, but it's, you can have them repeat some sort of pattern, and the first person that's off the pattern, then they have to answer the question, or maybe something that they have to say orally, and whoever, you know, there's a video on my channel where I talk about, it was called, it was a game called, it's with a ship, and they have to say, build on a sentence. I can't remember the exact game. It's crazy. Like after doing a lot of videos, they all kind of like intermingle and then you forget. But this game, they build up on one another. And the first person who stutters or doesn't say it, then they're the ones that answer. So it's, you just have to kind of get creative. The biggest thing I feel with games is you have to look at games that you enjoy, do research and see. I'm constantly doing that, just researching different games and thinking, okay, how can I tweak that to make it more doable in the classroom? But you're certainly correct. In this day and age, we definitely have to be careful. So that's what's so great about games like Kahoot and all the digital ones that you can use with your students.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes.
There were a few people who submitted questions as they registered, so I wanted to kind of bring those up for you. One person was asking, how do you prepare these games ahead of time if you don't know the student needs yet? So do I just have to prepare all of them and hope that I have one that's going to work, or do you wait and kind of assess student needs and then like
Yeah.
scramble and try to put things together, or how do you handle that?
It's a mixture of both. I mean, for example, this was just a trial and error. So for example, ahead of time, as all, you know, teachers do, is that you're planning your lessons, and I'll look at what I'm teaching, what are the games that I already know that I can, oh, I can use this game. Like for example, we had a unit that was on nouns and adjectives, so that was perfect for that particular Uno game. So I add that in there. So it's just looking at where you can fit it, because I look at the year, I have my long range planning, and then I have my day-to-day, and then I assess, just like we do as teachers. We reflect after it's played. I look at, okay, maybe I need to tweak it and not do this next time. So you start accruing little by little. You kind of have to test it out based on the personality of your students, as well as their language level and just their overall content, their background and comfortability, you know, comfort level with some of these. So yes.
Great. And then another question was about the game. Do the games work if you're one-to-one with students? So if you're a tutor of ESL, or if you are doing breakouts and you're having individual conferences with students or really small groups. Could these still work, do you think?
Absolutely. And with the one-on-one, for example, the guess the word game is perfect for that, because if I'm tutoring a student, you know, you almost have to take the role of the student and play, you know, play one-on-one with them. The bingo game can be a little tricky because obviously you need more than one student, but you know, I'm sure that there's ways that you can get creative towards that. But some of them, you know, I like to use a lot of file folder games. There's also digital file folder games that you can find online as well that lends itself. But take a look at the Uno card games, because there are so many, I mean, it's just crazy. There's just so many different versions of the game that some of them lend itself a lot easier to playing one-on-one.
A great question just popped up, asking about the research on gamifying and its relationship with lowering the effective filter. It must be out there. I agree, Kimberly, it must be out there. I can't think of a name of a researcher off the top of my head who has done that. Dr. Hemphill, do you know?
I mean, I know Stephen Krashen talks about it a lot, not specifically towards game. It's kind of, not in the ESL realm, but definitely Robert Marzano talks about it a lot, you know, the use of games and why they're so important. But I think if you merge the two, Stephen Krashen, there's Cummings, and also they emphasize that a lot, which I think is, but you're definitely right. I mean, I saw that with a student who would not speak at all literally in her classes. And then she spoke out, she spoke very quietly, but she felt that the games weren't threatening. You know, she just felt a lot comfortable. And, you know, it just shows the power that they have to really get students engaged and participate and speaking, because it's what we want. We want our students to be able to apply what they're learning and speak more and engage more in the class.
Yeah. There's another question that just popped up. Christina is asking about links to specific research, and she's not the only one who has mentioned that she has supervisors who are skeptical of games and whether or not you're actually like hitting that instruction and that targeted instruction. And so do you have anything that you can recommend in terms of research or articles that maybe somebody could slyly pass along to a supervisor?
There's 3 to 4 that are already linked.
Okay.
It's when you go to that Google Drive, I just added it today. It's a Word document, and it says linked to research or something like that. I forget what I wrote, and I listed the 3. I mean, and there's just so many. And if any of you are still after this having a hard time, make sure to just find me on Instagram. I'll be more than happy to send you the links directly and see if that works that way. I answer all of the comments that come to me on YouTube, so that's also another way we can communicate should we, you know, lose connection here.
Great. And Julie wants to know, how frequently do you add games? Do you do 1 new game a week or every class, or how long do you work with a game before you maybe bring in something else?
I usually play a certain game depending on what the game is and how applicable it is. Like the clap and catch game, I play that pretty often because it's something, the gamifying ones are easier to apply multiple times because it's, and I'll ask them, you know, which one do you want to play today? And, oh, I want to do the clap and catch, or, oh, I want to do this one. But I would say roughly at least 1 to 2 times a week. It depends. It really is one where it depends on the particular lesson. I don't necessarily gamify all of them. So I would say maybe once or twice a week, I'll do that. Now the actual games in itself, the ones that are not gamified, I mean, on the top of my head, like in a month's time, maybe I'll do 5 of those, but it's really depends. You know?
Mm-hmm. And with this year starting off online, most likely, will that change? You maybe will go a little bit slower because everybody's learning sort of in a different medium now?
Oh, absolutely. I think right now, particularly with my school district, that we are a Title I school district and low socioeconomic, one of the things we are looking at is just really focusing on how to use how to go into Google Classroom, how to use, you know, all the different elements we've been using, how to use Zoom, because we were one of the later school districts to be able to get laptops in the hands of every student And the laptops that they received were actually not extra laptops, they were the ones from our classroom. So literally when I go back we start August 17th, I don't know when I'm going to get those laptops back. So it's one of those things where you just have to be flexible and just, just go as you go.
And we have a question around adult learners. Do you have any tips or ideas? Have you ever worked with adult learners using games, especially adults who might be resistant to doing the game thing or not?
But I know that I recommend another YouTuber by the name, I'm trying to think of her name, the name of her channel. I think it's Learning Together. I'm gonna look it up and send it to you. But she actually teaches as adults in Guatemala. And it's amazing. Like she also uses clap and catch as well. And they love it. They're just absolutely, so you'll be amazed at what adults are actually willing to play. They love it. They love Kahoot. They love Bamboozle. They tease each other. So I actually saw for myself in many of her videos the simulation of these games that she did. And these were adults in the 30s, 40s, sometimes older, that are trying to learn English. And it was fantastic. It really was.
Yeah, Karen is saying that she teaches adults and they love Kahoot. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that, Karen. Valerie wants to know how students make the transference to content. So they're having fun, they're engaged in the games, but cognitively, how do they make that transference to content? Is that just something you see happen gradually because of increased engagement, or are there some extra steps that you take post game to kind of ensure that they're making those connections?
Yes, and I forgot to mention that earlier, that the game portion is the we do part, and it will replace the we do part. So there's always the beginning of the lesson, I start with the objectives. What is the language objective we're going to cover, the content objective, and I will model and give a short lesson. I try not to go too long, because then you lose students, and I'm pretty interactive with them. Then the we do part is maybe the game. It will replace the actual, it will be an aspect. So the content part, maybe we're reading a book together, but then we'll do the game. And then they do the I do part. So it puts it all together, where they'll practice it with, they might have a multiple choice assignment, or they have to write something online. So it brings it all together. The games is just one of the different features that we do in class. For example, exposing them to graphic organizers or those best practices. So yeah, it's just one of the small parts of the entire lesson that I teach them. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. There are a few people who are asking about how they can find you on Insta. So I'm actually going to backtrack here on my slides back to this page, so they can see your handles, because I know people are going to want to be reaching out to you. One last thing, you mentioned file folder games earlier. Not everybody knows what those are. So I think most people do, but a handful were asking what those are. So if you could clarify that.
Sure. So a couple of years ago, when I taught 5th grade, one of the things I had is that I had a lot of early finishers, but I would still be working with a small group or monitoring student progress. So I came across this particular resource that comes from, and this is a while ago, it comes from literacy centers. And basically what it is that it's a book that has these ready-made folder games. So it comes with the cover that's ready. So you just take a folder that you have lying around in your classroom, and you tape the cover, and inside it will have instructions for the students to complete. So for example, in this particular lesson, it's name the relationship. And so it has a little blurb or a teaching point for the student and an example. And then afterwards, which I love about this, is that it'll go through the steps that they have to do in order to play the game. So I use this a lot because it was independent, and if they had questions, they could, but I always taught my students before I even started breaking them up into groups. I would teach it to them. And then inside the folder will come the game pieces that are, it usually comes already with a set, so you cut them out. So that way, this one I should have laminated, but I was very lucky that I cut them all back and it wasn't destroyed. And then in order to assess formatively what they were able to learn, just so that there's that accountability measure. Then there's an actual sheet that they fill out, they answer, that's a result of the game, and they just pop it right back into the folder, and I check it at the end of the day, and it just gives me that sense of, okay. And I'll usually tell them, I'll give them choices based on the areas that they need extra work on, and it works really, really great. And one of the things I'd like to explore are digital file folder games. I'm pretty sure that someone out there, especially in teacher paid teacher land, has created some of those. So
that's a great idea. If anybody is looking for a teacher paid teacher idea, online file folder games sounds like a good one to start investigating. All
I think
right.
someone was just asking the link for this, the website. I think I found this on Amazon years ago. It's by Even Corp. So I'll just write that down in the chat box. I just saw that question, so.
And Sandra, make sure you respond to all panelists and attendees.
Yeah.
There's a drop down there. I always forget to do that, so.
Yes. And more Corp. Maybe if I just put the whole thing there, you can be able to Google it, and then you'll be able to find it. 2724.
All right, great. Tell us again your handle on Insta, because what we have here is at the Language Lady, but are you Language Lady 3? Somebody keeps asking if you're Language Lady 3. We might have an error here.
On Instagram, I'm pretty sure I'm just at the Language Lady.
Okay, that's what we have. We'll double check that for you just to make sure that we're sending people to the right place.
Yep, it's at the Language Lady.
At the Language Lady. All right. Well, it is 4 o'clock. We've been going for about 1 hour, so we usually like to wrap up at about this time. Don't forget to join us next week for Valentina Gonzalez. Thank you, Dr. Hemphill, for answering all these questions and presenting all this wonderful information. Don't forget to find Saddleback on social media. We are on whatever your favorite social media platform is, we are there. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube. If you need to reach us, please email contact@sdlback.com, and you can find us on the web, sdlback.com, where you can check out all of our books and resources, and of course, information on upcoming webinars. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you, Dr.
so
Hemphill.
much.
All right, we'll see everybody hopefully next week. Take care.
Good luck, everybody, with the school year.
Yes, good luck.